Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of At the Coalface Live for today, Friday, the 1st of April, 2022. April Fools. Hope you guys are having a fantastic Friday. For those of you in North America and in other places, it is obviously still Thursday for you, but it is awesome to be here with you again. And as of what I've been doing lately, I'm live streaming to Facebook Live and YouTube Live, and then I'll take the YouTube link and I will post that to LinkedIn after this broadcast ends, just because LinkedIn Live just gives you no love as a broadcaster. And so the embedded YouTube links on LinkedIn seem to actually perform better than native LinkedIn Live, which shouldn't be that way, but it is what it is. So it is good to be here with you guys today. We want to go ahead and talk about something that I haven't covered in any great detail on my lives so far, and that is the concept or the struggle and the challenge around channel mix or channel selection. And we're not just talking about channel mix from a transactional perspective, we're also talking about channel mix from a marketing perspective. And many brands, particularly smaller brands that have to really focus their limited resources on one or two channels, both transactional and marketing, they are really going to struggle, particularly as they become more constrained over the next 12 to 24 months. There's going to be some real challenges. We're facing global headwinds around getting into some hyperinflation territory. We're dealing with global logistics woes, which don't seem to be getting any better at all. And in fact, for most brands, they're actually getting worse, and logistic costs are going through the roof. Fulfillment timelines are blowing out. And as China continues to pursue a COVID zero policy, which is just, frankly, here in New Zealand, we first tried to pursue a COVID zero policy and it just doesn't work. A virus is going to virus. And that's just the way that it is. So it feels like absolute insanity that China is pursuing and continues to pursue a COVID zero policy. And that is going to put further pressures on the global supply chain as goods flowing out of China become increasingly constricted and as they continue to lock down in pursuit of a COVID zero policy. Then when we look at customer acquisition costs going through the roof, when we look at privacy changes with iOS and the death of third-party cookies, when we look at shrinking economies globally due to the airdropping of quantitative easing around the world to refloat economies after the end of COVID, and rising taxes in most places as well to offset all of those billions and billions of dollars that were spent on COVID. So we've got global challenges pretty much across the board. And with all of the massive volume of new businesses that went online during the last 2 years plus during the COVID era, and as we slowly start to roll out of the COVID era, and as physical retail stores, malls, and the like start to reopen and continue to reopen, the massive online demand that was at its absolute peak for the last, say, 18 months, that is going to start to abate. That is going to start to ameliorate. And we're going to start to get back to more of a 2019 and earlier mean of online sales. Now, are the percentages, like, let's just take New Zealand as an example. We were at around 9% total penetration of total retail with e-commerce pre-pandemic. So we're talking 2019 and earlier, with about, say, about 9% of total retail was e-commerce. Now, we gained about probably a decade's worth during the COVID peak of COVID, when everybody was locked down, when everybody was forced to shop from home, and really the only thing you could actually go out and physically shop for was pretty much groceries. During that peak, we saw about 10 years worth of pandemic-induced growth. So we saw about 19% in New Zealand anyway, roughly 19% penetration of total retail became e-commerce during that window of time where everybody was forced to buy online. And so we gained about 10 years worth of growth in the span of, say, 6 months. Now, do I think that is all going to go away, that those gains are 100% going to go away? No, I don't. But do I think they're 100% going to stick? No, I don't. And so where I think we're probably going to land is we're going to probably land around maybe, because we were growing at about 1% per year prior to COVID hitting. We were growing at about 1% a year in terms of total e-commerce penetration. So if we take 2020, 2021, and 2022, And if we aggregate that 1% of growth over those 3 years, we're looking at around 12% of total penetration of retail in New Zealand. Now, let's be generous and say that we maybe get to 13 or 14% penetration of total retail for e-commerce. That is still nothing like 19, 20, 21% penetration of total retail. So when I say we're reverting back to the mean, we're reverting back to that 1% per year growth. And if we take the 2019 state, which was roughly 9%, we tack on that 1% year growth between then and now. So we'd be at around 12%. And let's be generous and add a couple extra percent of COVID retention growth of online retail. We're still only sitting around that 13, 14, maybe 15% maximum penetration of total retail. Now, what that tells me is that the thousands and thousands and thousands of new e-commerce websites that went online and came online, and new brands that came online, or brands that had a legacy e-commerce experience and invested millions and millions of dollars in their e-commerce experience and leveled up dramatically during this time, we have seen just a huge influx of competition online that was not there pre-COVID. And as a result of that, we're seeing a totally unsustainable amount of online retail. There's only a certain percentage of the retail pie that is e-commerce. Let's call it 13, 14, 15% here in New Zealand. Let's call it 18, 19, 20% in Australia. Let's call it 21, 22, maybe even up to 25%. Absolutely topping out at 25% in certain parts of the United States and Asia. And if we look at the UK, they're probably, in the Western world, they're probably about the highest total penetration of e-commerce in the world. And they're topping out at that 28, 29, 30% of total retail being e-commerce. So New Zealand is right down on the bottom of the totem pole, UK right at the top of the totem pole. And still, we are less than 1/3, even in the UK, less than 1/3 e-commerce as a percentage of total retail. So when we think about those types of figures shaking out, and when we think about the amount of online competition that has come into play over that time, it is absolutely patently clear that not all of these brands that have come online for the first time or spent big on improving their e-commerce operations, it is absolutely unsustainable. There's no way that all of these brands are going to survive the onslaught of the headwinds, the global economic macro headwinds that are coming our way. There's no way that this is sustainable as total retail shrinks, or most likely shrinks. Most countries will likely go into recession over the next 12 to 18 months as quantitative easing slows down, as central banks fight inflation by raising interest rates. The central bank in the United States, the Reserve Bank, has signaled that they are going to be raising interest rates considerably over the next 12 months, most likely to fight inflationary pressures. Reserve Bank of New Zealand has signaled similar, and they're walking a tightrope. They're walking a tightrope between a global economy that is fragile due to all the billions of dollars the governments have spent fighting COVID, severely weakened economies with high unemployment rates, and they are fighting inflation by raising interest rates, which is going to put a brake on the economy even further. So we are caught into what is likely to turn out to be, over the next 12, 18, 24 months, a stagflationary environment, which means inflation continues to grow, the real economy continues to shrink. So the real economy is stagnating while inflation is increasing, meaning the disposable income that people have is much, much lower than what it was over the last couple of years. So we're facing massive secular headwinds all around the world, and it is absolutely patently clear that the amount of online competition that was built up during the COVID era is totally, totally unsustainable moving forward. So I try to avoid being a doomsayer because, look, I'm one of the biggest global advocates there is for e-commerce. I am one of the the biggest global advocates there is for omni-channel. I am one of the biggest advocates for digital routes to market and digital service models. So I am still bullish long term, medium and long term. I'm absolutely bullish on digital channels. I'm absolutely bullish on e-com. I'm bullish on omni-channel. I'm bullish on Web3. I'm bullish on the metaverse long term as an environment where people will do, over the next 5, 10, 15 years. As the metaverse goes mainstream, there's absolutely no question that the shopping experiences that people do via e-commerce websites today will transition into metaverse mediated e-commerce environments and omni-channel environments instead. Now, having said all of that and being bullish in the medium to long term, the short term is what we're talking about here. There's some severe short term pain that is going to come to most brands, pretty much all but the very largest brands that have virtual monopolies or duopolies in their categories and in their regions. Almost everyone else is going to have a really tough time over the next 12, 18 to 24 months. Again, medium long term, I'm bullish on the sector. I'm bullish on ecom. I think it's going to only continue to grow as a percentage of retail. So the opportunity is clearly there. However, how can brands bridge that period between now and say 18 to 24 months from now? How can they build a bridge that allows them to survive what is a really staggeringly difficult macroeconomic environment that is emerging globally? How can they best protect themselves and get them from point A to point B, which point A is now, point B is say, on the outside 24 months from now? How can they best position their businesses to weather this economic storm so that they have the best opportunity to emerge out the other side in a lean, mean, fighting machine way so that they can come out swinging and further consolidate their position in the market out the other side? Well, one of the major considerations that brands have to take on board when they're thinking about how they get from A to B, how they bridge from where they are today to where they need to be in 24 months' time, is channel mix. That is one of the biggest, most hairy conversations that every brand is having right now, both internally with me as a consultant, with other consultants, with agencies, etc. That is one of the most difficult and challenging discussions when brands are retrenching, which is what most of them are doing now. They're trying to conserve cash. They're spending a lot of cash on logistics, global logistics. Their global logistics costs have gone through the roof, so they're spending money. They're leaning themselves out, but they're spending all of that saved capital. They're now spending it on additional logistics cost, additional flooring and stock holding costs, both inbound and outbound to their end customers. And so how can brands best insulate themselves against these challenges and these headwinds? Well, what they need to do is they need to look at diversification that is easy to diversify. And when I say easy, I mean relatively speaking. So any brand that is a mono channel brand today, so let's say a brand is an e-commerce pure play brand today, it is unlikely that they are going to go out and have the resources to go out and start a retail chain, physical retail chain tomorrow to capitalize on the return to physical retail. It is unlikely that they will have the resources to do that. And conversely, a physical retail chain that has chronically invested in e-commerce and omni-channel capabilities, even through COVID, and surprisingly, a lot of brands still did that. They still they may have invested more in their omni-channel offerings outside of physical retail over the last 2 years, but they were just trying to make up for a decade or more of underinvestment in omni-channel capabilities, omni-channel tech, omni-channel internal human resources to drive these channels successfully. And as a result of that, it is unlikely that they will have the resources available to them over the next 12 to 24 months to dramatically improve further than what they've already achieved over the last 2 years. It is unlikely they will be able to dramatically improve their omni-channel experience significantly over the next 12 to 24 months in a more compressed economic environment. So what are these brands to do? So what they need to do, and what I'm seeing brands increasingly twig to, which is good to see, is that they need to find ways of onboarding new channels into the business, both marketing and transactional, that are relatively speaking easy to onboard. So if I'm an e-commerce pure play today, and I'm staring down the barrel of say an environment where I'm largely B2C, or maybe I'm direct to consumer, maybe I'm a manufacturer, wholesaler, or importer that has a direct to consumer channel, or I've also got a retail channel where I'm selling other people's stuff via my pure play online website. For those brands, they need to start looking at other digital transactional channels that are relatively easy to onboard in the business. So they need to be looking at marketplaces. They need to be looking at social commerce. They need to be looking at these other transactional channels where they can do collaborations with other brands, where they can onboard these channels relatively easy, because nowadays with the likes of omni-channel plugin connectors that plug into the major e-commerce platforms that or they already have an outbound connector to go to the likes of Amazon, eBay, Catch, Trade Me, all the, Mercado Libre, all the globally popular marketplaces, the omni-channel connectors that are out there in the market, the omni-channel middleware that plugs into the likes of Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, etc. Those channels are relatively easy to onboard once you onboard that middleware. And the middleware itself is actually pretty cheap because it's SaaS and you might pay a monthly fee. So we're talking about the likes of Omnivore, Channel Advisor, GoData Feed. We're talking about all, and there's many. This channel engine concept, this channel middleware concept has become democratized because it's largely become commoditized over the last decade. And so therefore, these platforms and plugins that plug into your e-commerce website, which take your product data and push it out to these other channels, including social media selling channels, so social media stores, as well as pushing them out to local and regional marketplaces, and then pulling down those orders from those transactional marketplaces, pushing it into your e-commerce platform so it can go through your normal fulfillment model, and then updating from your e-commerce platform the shipment details and pushing those status updates back out to those channels. That technology that sits in the middle that allows that to happen has become commoditized. And so therefore, it's relatively inexpensive and it's relatively fast to onboard those new digital transactional channels into the business. And so that's what these businesses need to be looking at. They need to be looking at how can we onboard new channels that de-risk our dependence on one single channel, that being our own direct-to-consumer or pure play B2C e-commerce website. So how can we distribute the risk across more channels? Because if you've got one channel that comprises 100% of your revenue and something happens to that channel, and when we think of something happening to that channel in a D2C play, it is the stratospheric CAC costs going through the roof, and therefore getting more traffic to your website is going to get more and more costly over time. And so one way to de-risk that and de-risk that dependence on all this CAC is to go into channels that already have traffic and that already have consumers knocking down their door. And marketplaces and social commerce channels are places where people and audiences are already congregating, buyers are already congregating, they're already, well down the funnel by that point, and they're basically ready to buy. And as a result of that, if you can tap into those channels, sure, those channels always have a cost associated with them as well, but oftentimes nowadays, onboarding those channels and running those channels and paying success fees and listing fees and all the rest actually is far, far less expensive in aggregate versus the CAC costs of acquiring direct consumers and direct traffic coming to your website, which when they come to your website, they're not going to convert it 100% anyway. So not only are you paying to get all that traffic there, but your conversion rate is not going to be 100%. So therefore, even if you pay for that traffic, you're not 100% of those are going to turn into customers anyway. So the CAC cost is actually higher than the headline cost of the traffic that you're paying Facebook or Google or Apple or Amazon to send to your website. That aggregated cost is much higher than sometimes what the headline cost of actually doing that advertising looks like, because obviously your conversion rate is not 100% on that traffic. So these brands have to start thinking about how can we de-risk our brands, and how can we de-risk even our acquisition. How can we de-risk that? So again, just like we talked about, if it's a pure play business and they're trying to diversify their risk or trying to de-risk their business by going into other digital channels that they can relatively easily and cheaply and quickly onboard into their business, where a segment of their customers will always be, because the 100% of the customers are not going to want to come to their direct website and purchase from them. So they're going to want to de-risk their marketing channels as well. I oftentimes go in and I consult to businesses, and I am not a marketing consultant. That's not my primary service that I provide. I primarily provide services around tech stack, solution architecture, integration architecture, organizational design, process design, and all sorts of other consulting around the more technical aspects of running and scaling and growing an omni-channel business. But I don't have it's not like I'm going to go in and I'm going to help you with your performance marketing, or I'm going to go and help you, run your Facebook and your Google ads. That is not a service I provide. But one of the things that we do look at when we go in, and at least we have a discussion about, is dependencies on singular channels for the bulk of traffic and the bulk of acquisition. And so when I see a brand, and when we look at their Google Analytics, or we look at some of their other predictive analytics platforms, and we look at some of their other, cost management platforms and their BI tools, when I see 80 to 90% of their traffic coming to their website from AdWords, for example, that terrifies me. When I see 80 or 90% of their traffic coming from Facebook properties through Facebook ads, that terrifies me. When I see 80 to 90% of their sales coming through Amazon ads, advertising, that terrifies me. So anytime you have a singular marketing channel, digital marketing channel, I hesitate to even call them marketing channels. They're actually digital sales channels because they're so far down the intent funnel. They build themselves as digital marketing channels, but they're not really marketing channels. They're demand capture channels more than anything else. And I consider that sales, not marketing. But if we look at these digital marketing channels as they're known colloquially in the market, if you've got more than 20% of your traffic and your revenue coming from any one of those marketing channels, I consider that high risk. So if you're at 25 to 35 to 45% Google paid search, Google ads traffic, you have got to figure out a way to de-risk that traffic source as soon as possible. And so whether that means starting to think about, again, collaborating, whether you test out programmatic, or whether you test out, Facebook ads for the first time, or whether you test out, Amazon ads for the first time, or you look at other digital channels, other digital properties where you can actually run ads that are targeted and contextual for your customers. They don't have to necessarily be display ads, but there has to be some form of collaboration. There's some form of opportunity of getting your brand in front of new customers digitally. If you can't diversify your traffic sources, you are extremely vulnerable to something like Google cutting off third-party cookies. When they do, you are going to be in deep shit. And you also need to start looking at the customer data that you're collecting at source on your owned properties. You need to start thinking about a CDP, marketing automation, and all the rest. But regardless of that, that data is going to help you remarket across those marketing channels that you have today much more effectively, and more importantly, cost effectively. But you still have to diversify the total number of marketing channels you operate across. Now, many brands are going to think, well, how can I do that in a time when I am retrenching in my business? Jason, on the one hand, you're telling me I need to save money, and on the one hand, you're telling me I need to give myself 18 to 24 months worth of financial runway to get me through the macroeconomic pain that's coming. But on the other hand, you're also telling me I need to diversify my marketing and my sales channels. Well, yes, all of the above. You need to do both. And so what we need to be thinking about is how can we lean ourselves out internally as a business to give us the best chance of having that runway to survive the coming 12 to 24 months. But we also need to think about where are we going to strategically allocate our spend to de-risk our business as much as possible from a transactional channel and a marketing channel perspective. So these are the types of very, very hard discussions that are going to need to happen inside businesses over the next couple of years. And I'm not saying they're easy discussions, and I'm not saying they're easy decisions to make. However, if you can start looking at, have a deep dive into your analytics data, if you can have a deep dive into your customer data, if you can have a deep dive into your product data, and you let's say you have a PIM, a good quality PIM system, a good quality CDP system, a good, if you have good quality BI tooling in your business, then you are pretty rapidly going to be able to figure out which products on a unit economics basis are the most successful for your business. You're going to be able to highly curate your catalog to where instead of having your limited financial resources spread across a catalog of 1,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 SKUs, maybe you cull the bottom 50% of those SKUs out of your catalog that have the poorest unit economics against them, so that you can free up capital to attack new transactional and marketing channels instead. So businesses only have a total amount of resources that they can spend in the market at any given point in time. And that has to be spread across salaries, has to be spread across inventory, has to be spread across operational costs, has to be spread across CapEx and OpEx across the entire company. And so when we think about it, it is really about, when we look at VCs that are investing into e-commerce now, they're capital allocators and they're picking the ones that are most likely to win. Well, we as business owners and operators, we are capital allocators inside our own business. So we are going to have to get increasingly ruthless as we look across our business. We're going to have to get increasingly ruthless about where we allocate resources to get us through the next 12 to 24 months. Hopefully this information and this dialogue has spurred some unique thinking inside your business that maybe you haven't looked at before. Hopefully it gives you some ideas, and hopefully it gives you some thoughts that are going to give you some confidence of some steps that you can take to help your business become more sustainable over the next 12 to 24 months, and help further the likelihood that you will not become a casualty of a readjusted global marketplace over the next 12 to 24 months. All the best. Fantastic weekend. Look out for you on social media. I love to interact with you guys, so come and chat with me across all the social channels I play on, and we'll look forward to catching up with you next Friday on At the Coalface Live. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.